Basically, what we want to do is introduce an exciting new project at Vulcan. And this is a two-part project. One is a free resource for the community that allows you to apply what we're doing to your own vulnerability management program. And the other, and David will walk you through that, is we are applying that within the Vulcan platform to align your vulnerability and risk management program directly to MITRE ATT&CK. So if we can go on to the next slide. So first, we're going to talk about why MITRE ATT&CK, and this is something that's increasingly being adopted. It may not be the only standard, but quick introduction, and then we'll talk about some of the legacy mapping. So MITRE ATT&CK is much bigger than vulnerability and risk management. In fact, previous efforts to map vulnerabilities, particularly CVEs, to MITRE ATT&CK have proven to be a challenge, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why, what has been done to date. And then we'll move on to why we've taken this on. And I do want to caveat this. I'm effectively going to be talking about the work of Voyager 18, who is our in-house research team. You heard about them earlier. They're the ones who put together our research report. They're also the researchers who go out and identify and find and put together all of the remediation intelligence that goes into the platform. So that drives a lot of what we're doing and a lot of the intelligence within Vulcan Cyber. And that includes, things that help you understand risk in actuality, whether risk is likely to happen, whether it's likely to happen to you. And they also go out and research the potential fix, whether that's a patch, configuration change, compensating control. If there's something that you can't do, they'll go out and identify workarounds that will work. But beyond that, they've taken on recently mapping MITRE ATT&CK to CVEs. And so this is why we're here. And this is a great intro. So just moving on to the next slide. So why past attempts have fallen short. So MITRE ATT&CK to CVE mapping is something that was taken on. MITRE kicked this off, and really what they were trying to do was to help you identify and reduce the likely avenues of attack to MITRE. And they did this in three methods. So they were using three different things to pull that together. And sorry, I can't quite see what's going on. So that was vulnerability type, functionality, and exploit technique. And below you'll see just kind of a map of how that works. So, the three different things, mapping vulnerability types. So mapping to the prior attack process started with the vulnerability type. And that was actually looking at three different things that could be potentially used to identify that. The exploitation technique, the primary impact, and the secondary impact. So, these were the things that were used to initially identify that, but there wasn't a lot of detail for many of the attacks, many of the CVEs that would allow that to identify everything. So they moved on to functionality. Now, the functionality component this is mapping a CVE to a capability that the attacker didn't have before, right? So it's something that if this is exploited, it allows them to do a thing. And then the exploit technique is the steps that are taken for that specific vulnerability. Whether that's phishing, using valid hard coding credentials, something along those lines. And what you look at then is you've got a CVE, which is mapped to their mapping. Then you've got what it allows. So it allows, if you've got unsecure credentials, that's a CVE. It will allow you to exploit public-facing applications, which enables you to then use unsecured credentials to access the system, which leads to you using valid accounts to then go commit your exploit. Now, moving on to the next slide, this is what you ended up with. And this is really kind of where it fell short. So it's a great start. The intent was there, but there are multiple problems with this, not the least of which is the fact that this is the last update within the attack to CVE matrix, and that's in February, if you can't read that, February 3rd of 2021. So you're also then left with a very non-contextualized set of data. So this is a table that has just the CVE ID. the primary impact, sometimes the secondary impact if it's there, the exploitation techniques, and very little additional information. And this has certain weaknesses. One, it's a very manual process. You have to go look up all of these individual things individually because there's no information unless you've memorized all of the CVEs or all of the attack tactics and techniques. Obviously, the information is very outdated. And that's one of the problems with a straight community approach is that you have a lot of good intention, but you're always relying on somebody to take the time to go update that. And that means you've got a lot of required expertise to go out, figure out what these things mean, and then map them to your environment. And that's where Voyager 18 comes in. So Voyager 18 is, as I mentioned, our internal research team, and they've added what they're calling a pattern-based approach. And they're taking really multiple techniques to try and expand out how they're looking at it. And I'm not going to dig into too much into detail on the methodology because they explain it a lot better in a white paper. And we'll follow up with a link to that so that you can download that and really see how they dig into the details. But there are multiple components to this that they're doing. One of these is the CVSS score. So, this is something that communicates the characteristics and severity of vulnerabilities. It's got a base score, and it's looking at multiple things. So this is one of the primary vectors that they're looking at, which is it's got the user interaction and what sort of user interaction is necessary for that exploit. Privilege required, so does it require any privilege for that particular exploit? And it's got the attack vector built into that. So is it a network-based attack? Is it a local attack? Is it an adjacent attack or physical attack? And again, some of these things don't necessarily apply to the vulnerabilities that we're addressing, but it's a more comprehensive approach. Now, they're also looking at what they call CIA to impact, the confidentiality, the integrity, and availability to impact, which is the confidentiality, which will look at whether or not this particular technique will have an impact on the confidentiality of the data behind it. It will also then measure the impact of whether or not the integrity of that information is compromised. And then it will also look at the availability. So, for example, something like a DDoS, will this particular technique limit access to that particular data set? Then they also are looking at CWEs, and then they're looking at text as well. So looking at using techniques that they built in-house around kind of machine learning and text analysis to add that last layer of accuracy. And then what you end up with are, in this particular case, we've got a Microsoft browser memory corruption vulnerability. This is the CVE associated with it. And then you'll notice, and this is where the table falls short, is that you've got multiple techniques based on the different components that they've analyzed. And in here, we've got both techniques and sub-techniques that have been aligned with it. Now, where this is really important is the delivery. So if we move on to the next screen, this is actually the free tool that we have. Now, this is an early iteration of this. We'd love feedback on this. We'd love you to use it. But what this allows you to do is two different things. One, look at individual CVEs. So I've pulled one up here, which is an Apache related CVE about improper restriction of XML external entity references. So you can look at the individual CVEs. You could also look at tactics or techniques and identify all the CVEs that we've associated a map to that. So picking a specific technique, you might see that there are 15 different CVEs. And moving on to the next slide, this is how that looks in practice. So here's the big distinction between what was done before and what was done after. Well, first off, we give you all of the information around it that is readable. One, it's not just the CVE, it's a description of what that CVE is. It's got the CWE, it's got a CVSS score. And we also map out the techniques with the name itself and show you the tactics and how they're related. So here's, those 6 different, for this particular CVE, those 6 different techniques are also then associated with the individual tactics that they roll up under. Now, the great thing about how they set this up is that they've also provided access directly from those CVEs to Remedy Cloud, which is another free tool that we provide. And Remedy Cloud includes the remediation intelligence that Voyager 18 puts together. So you can go directly up, if you can back up real quick, you can go directly by clicking on that CVE up at the top to accessing the information around it. And I selected this particular one because it's very concise onto one page. Typically, you might have multiple fixes and also workarounds. So what you're looking at here is just a very concise view, but that's allowing you to effectively go from any CVE on the MITRE Mapper directly to Remedy Cloud to find the fix itself. And that allows you to potentially pass that information on to the people who are looking at that, depending on how you've adopted that. So now we're ready for the next slide. And here are the benefits to you. One, it's process standardization, and that's why MITRE ATT&CK was developed in the first place. You can adopt a common framework that security professionals are using, which allows you to understand information faster. It's giving you a consistent understanding of what that is, and it allows you to put together a best practice approach on understanding your security risks and understanding how to take care of those. From a cybersecurity alignment standpoint, again, from a vulnerability risk standpoint, this hasn't really been done effectively in the past. But you aren't the only component of a security operations team. And that security operations team or teams or different divisions within your organization, depending on how you're laid out, may be using MITRE ATT&CK in other ways. There are many of the tools that they're using, or if you're, for example, using an MDR service, those are being frequently judged against their ability to detect different tactics and techniques. So there are benchmarking things going on there, and that's leading other teams to adopt MITRE ATT&CK and other solutions to align what they're talking about, the information that they're presenting, to tactics and techniques as well. So it allows you to start approaching this from a consistency standpoint with those other teams, and it helps you to adapt some of the things that you're doing to their processes. Now, proactive threat mitigation. A lot of the current, approaches or usage of MITRE ATT&CK is really on detection response, and these are critically important. But anything you can do to take that earlier in the process, so being proactive around eliminating specific components of the technique, means those security teams now have less to worry about. They're looking at fewer alerts. They can ignore things that they know have been patched, or where a workaround has been applied, to where they're not looking at those things as the critical threats that they might otherwise look at. And it allows you to just eliminate many of those technique exploits, effectively taking the teeth out of that particular attack vector, threat vector. And cross-team communication, again, when you look at it, whether you're using the free tools or the platform, which you'll see shortly, it allows you to communicate risk to other teams with the context that they need to actually mitigate. And that allows you across the board to reduce your attack surface exposure. So I'll kick you over to David now. He's going to show you how this applies within our platform. So you do have access to those free resources, but we're also taking this and weaponizing it within the Vulcan platform, so that you have an interactive dashboard that allows you to see your risk as it relates to MITRE ATT&CK, drill into that quickly, and take action to mitigate those things rapidly. All right, David, on to you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So, I'm David Gruberger, a product manager in Vulcan Cyber. So I'm here to, explain how we apply the MITRE ATT&CK framework to vulnerability management at this stage. But why is this so significant to your security operations? In a nutshell, cybersecurity teams can now assess vulnerability management against MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then apply a cross-team decision making related to developing a security strategy that allows, for example, a team that is leading with incident response to align with vulnerability management and um, ultimately avoid some vulnerabilities that like fixed vulnerabilities that would uh, be ports for um, an exploit. So what we see here is our MITRE ATT&CK report. And first of all, what we see, the first, the easier thing to see is that we have 5 tactics that are the most common ones in this environment. So we are seeing numbers for example, a demo environment, but it could be any customer environment. We have initial access, execution, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and collection as the most riskiest tactics from the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And well, those are possibilities of how you can prioritize vulnerabilities, not only from a risk point of view, but also from MITRE ATT&CK framework and strategizing together with other teams. Now, together with this layer of data, we also apply potential threat intelligence layers that our research team works on. So I could understand what of those vulnerabilities in my environment are also exploitable. Um, and this would just refresh my environment and say, okay, good. So now I have a picture of what's exploitable in the environment, and I added a new layer of information. We could also see packages or understand if we apply the campaign, which is like, did we open a task, remediation test for any attempts to those vulnerabilities or not? Now, in certain way, we'll also add layers of business context. So I have a high impact business, cloud business group that I want to understand how it behaves against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And I have this, new picture of, okay, this is a business group, a business department that is very important to our company. And now I have a picture of how it behaves against this framework. And not only that, I can finally decide what techniques are important to me. For example, if I decide to go for user execution, which is actually, uh, um, if any of my measures from like firewalls or any other measures that I use in the company to avoid having execution in the machines or in any servers, then a user could be also a prey for that. And I have a list of vulnerabilities that I can treat and remediate. So pretty much users will be able to select any number of those and take an action, open a ticket, or send an email to the right person, which is very important. And this could be done for any other framework. So in for example, one of the common techniques that are used, phishing, for example. So I could also go for understanding which have a critical risk level and are exploitable, and understand what needs to be fixed within the environment for phishing, and again, decide on remediation tasks. So with that said, there are no real limits for how you can use it. Our users are using it for, prioritizing and also even for justifying why they are asking teams to work on that. So passing this back to Gal, to Kevin, and yeah, that's my demo.
Great. Yeah, thanks, David. And just to reiterate, what David just showed you was in the enterprise platform, but the MITRE ATT&CK Mapper itself and Remedy Cloud are both free tools that you can access. We'll send links to those in a follow-up, as well as additional information around MITRE ATT&CK mapping methodology from Voyager 18. We'll send information around previous sessions too, but we'll also include the links to those solutions. And on the website, though, if you want to go to our website, just vulcan.io, under the CyberRisk hub, you'll have access, direct links to those tools as well. So all of that is available, and we encourage you not only to use these as you see fit, but if you want to provide feedback, on the MITRE ATT&CK Mapper in particular, as it's a newer project, we do have access to or provided a button for you to submit feedback, and we'd love it. So thanks again for your time.